now we want to talk about food security and stabilization of commodity prices in the country. We have been seeing this in the news. So when you talk about purchasing of fertilizer and then distributing this fertilizer to the farmers and saying, okay, our subsidy is going to be applied at the fertilizer, the input stage. Let's purchase fertilizer, let's bring it to a price that farmers could then afford and distribute to the farmers. Fertilizer is already being distributed to farmers. Who has purchased this fertilizer? We've talked about importation of grain, maize, rice, and in some cases, I think some cereals and other commodities. And we've been told there's this state agency called the Kenya National Trading Corporation that's also being involved in this, and it's looking for how to import this. The other day, there was a story in the papers. KNTC has how many shops?
1,200.
They said no,
Not
120,000.
They have identified
120,000.
Yes, according to the report, that was the number. Now you see, my eyes lit up, and I said, you're talking about new things being created, people getting cheap things, and more people being employed. I said, this one sounds good. Yes.
And then we asked ourselves, how is this going to work?
Exactly.
And we said, let's look for KNTC to come and explain to us.
Yes, this is something that, this guessing game,
not good.
Guess my birthday if you wish, but this is a matter of national concern. Let people who are experts in this matter come and tell us.
Okay.
Yes.
Pamela Mutua is the managing director of the Kenya National Trading Corporation. She now joins us in the Situation Room. Good morning, Pamela.
Good morning, all of you.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. You'll explain very many things to us. We'll ask you so that you can explain to the country. To welcome you to the show, City has the day's proverb, and this week's proverbs have been from a book that was published 3 months after he was born. The book was published on the 17th of June, 1958. So you see where we're coming with the birthday?
You see why we're saying happy birthday?
Let me tell you, I can understand now. Did you even know when you were born? I mean, which day? Those days. I thought it was to be measured by moons or something like that. Or when you saw the sun.
You've forgotten the level of water in the river. Yes.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Which was heralded by flights of certain birds in a certain direction.
Oh, yes.
Yes, all those things.
It was
the day of the full moon.
The day of the full moon.
That's it. That's all we know. That's the date. It was which date? No wonder he doesn't know the date.
Yeah.
Keep telling us, keep guessing.
I'm telling you.
He is the one who's guessing.
Totally, that I understand.
Hey, City, kabisa hapo leo umepatikana.
I have actually been consigned to the realms of a relic, because it's not even just prehistoric, it's pre-time.
BC.
Before Christ.
Yes.
When you were born, how did they keep you warm? I mean, they hadn't discovered fire.
Put you out in the sun a few hours every day.
Okay, the proverb, City.
Yeah.
Right. And how right our guest is. The proverb leads right into it. When the moon is shining. See, moon comes into the proverb. The cripple is hungry for a walk. Yes.
When the moon is shining,
Yes.
the cripple is hungry for a walk.
Yes.
Today's proverb, and me, they have refused to enter. Pamela, do you understand this? What's your translation or interpretation of this proverb?
I don't even know how to interpret it without sounding, sinister.
Sound sinister, please.
Yeah, please. So here I am, I'm just imagining the cripple would want to walk even when the sun is shining. Why only the moon? So I just don't get it.
Actually, the cryptic nature of such a proverb lies in precisely what you've just mentioned. You go beyond the obvious and you ask, okay, the obvious is a cripple would want to walk anyway. So why the moon? Because when the moon, and the reference that I provided was, if you grew up in the rural areas where there was no electricity When it was dark, it was really. I mean, you could not see even your own hand in front of your face. Now, with the moon came something unusual. So the reference is something unusual. So something that doesn't happen very often. And with it came a lot of joy and a lot of happiness because children could now play at night. Because remember, in the rural areas, by around 7, you're sleeping because
It's dark.
yes, and then there are these stories of the animals that lurk in the dark and what they can do for you. Now the moon dispelled all that. So you suddenly had an opportunity to do something at a time when you never could. So the exceptional circumstances is what brings about now the ethos of this particular proverb. So even a cripple who ordinarily couldn't walk, even in daylight, with the moon came this hope and expectation that something unusual might actually happen.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Wow, now I understand why he's here. He brings the wisdom to the team, isn't it?
I taught literature
Oh.
in a previous life.
Oh, fantastic.
Pamela,
Yes.
the Kenya National Trading Corporation was established 7 years after CT was born. In 1965. Why was it established? What's the mandate of KNTC?
So KNTC has several mandates, but I'll just go through them. Okay, so one of the things we are supposed to do is first spur up retail sector and wholesale sector as government bodies, as a government body. Enhance distribution of commodities and as and when required. We also do procurement for government on a need-to basis. So some government agencies can come to us and say, we need this and that. Are you able to procure for us? And then we'll do procurement from government to government basis. And for these specific, what we are talking about, food security and everything, we are mandated to actually import bulk commodities for food stabilization, for price stabilization. Essentially, because government is supposed to come in bursts, come in and then go out, because as we are in liberalized trade, we expect traders to perform optimally and to be, to take it upon themselves to price, goods, especially food, because food is very sensitive, to price it well. So when we see that, the pricing is become haywire, then the government is supposed to come in to provide the price stabilization. Yeah.
Does that mean that KNTC, whenever it's importing, it imports duty-free because it's government?
No, we don't normally always import duty-free. But at times like this, where first you can see there are various elements that are affecting pricing of goods. One being first availability of food, not only in Kenya, I think across the globe. Everyone is going through different aspects of food production. So you find even some countries have actually stopped exportation of food because they don't know the drought situation, how long it's going to take. So that is one. And the second thing, the dollar instability. When you find those kind of situations, then the government has to make decisions about whether at this point it makes, common sense to remove duty, some elements of duty from food to be able to bring the food price down. Meaning that when you extend that to a government body, then we extend it to the customer, to the consumer, who then buys the goods. So it's an element of rather than come and say you'll subsidize, because sometimes when you subsidize, it means the government is giving money to someone so that they can bring the commodity down, and you have no control of how that is done, because it's being done by people that are by companies or the private sector, and it's outside your control. So for us to limit that, we took a decision that the strategy we're going to take is extend the duty free for a certain amount of commodities that will go to a certain people, and then we are able to control the elements of distribution and the elements of reach in times like this.
You mentioned that, looking at the stabilization and the mechanisms that you use for stabilization, what informs that? Because you say when prices go haywire, then we step in and try to stabilize things. So what informs the haywireness? of things?
So basically, as government, not only as KNTC, we have other many government agencies. There are agencies that monitor price, local pricing and global pricing of food, commodities, amongst other commodities or other goods and services. So that agency is the one that will be able, gives information to guide policy on whether now government needs to step in to do that, to stabilize prices for certain commodities or for certain goods and services. So at this point in time, I think we are all aware that there is drought, as we know. I mean, of course, we are thankful that rain is here, and even when there is drought, there is also that prices of goods have really gone up. I mean, it's across the range, and this is driven, as I've said, by different elements. So that's the reason why the government now, came in and said, KNTC, this is your mandate. What can we do to be able to stabilize the prices? And and this is the direction that we decided to take. That it's easier for us to bring in the commodities, a certain aspect of it, and then send it to the people, extend the duty-free value to the people.
Does it also come where you also look at then prices of certain things then that must increase in price?
In what sense? I didn't get that question.
Okay, so we've seen, and we've seen that, and maybe tell us if you have any role to play in this, when we've seen that taxes, for example, on certain goods then will increase. Just recently we saw, I believe it was juice, we saw, on some alcoholic drinks. Are you involved in that process as well?
No,
or is it something
not
totally
really.
different?
But I've said, because there's agencies that are involved in looking at all these things, there's elements of consumption, elements of what people need. There's a need, there's a want, and there's, those are the things that determine. Yeah. So basically, I believe those agencies, because they also feed into other agencies, so some things like taxation and all that come from a different perspective. I mean, there's element of maybe Treasury and KRA sitting together and discussing why there's need to increase those taxes. So I'm not involved in that discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does this involve you, because you talked about importation, importing so that you bring the commodity in the country because you've seen the shortage of that commodity in the country, so that then you help to stabilize the supply and demand curve? Are there areas where you purchase locally?
Okay,
instances.
Yes. Okay. So for like 2 or 3 years, we've been buying rice locally. We've also been buying sugar locally and selling. We sell majorly G2G, government to government, because one of the things you appreciate is that our production costs have been extremely high as Kenya. So some of the goods we offtake. So when you find like when you buy Moya Bishori, and when you see the cost of Moya Bishori, I mean, it's highly unlikely you'll be competitive. So there are two things we do as a government body. First, it's also to cushion the farmer. So when you go to Moya, you'll find there's KNTC buying, but there's also a broker buying. So if I give an example, in Moya, a kilo of rice, I'm not so quite sure now how much it is. It could be around 145. I'll be buying maybe at around 130. But brokers will be buying at 110. So what happens when the bulk of the rice or local produce is being bought by brokers? The farmer is the one who's not getting the value. So when I come in as government, I want to cushion the farmer. I'm looking at how much are they invested. We work very closely with Ministry of Agriculture and the State Department of Cooperatives, because farmers are actually working under cooperatives. Yep. So ideally, it is better for a farmer to take their goods to a cooperative, and then the cooperative will approach us to bring for us to buy the goods. But what mostly happens is that because the farmer wants cash now, they have needs. They want to buy food, they want to pay school fees. So ideally, they are quick to take the lower cash. I'd rather take 110 shillings than wait for 130 from government. But because of that, it makes me almost uncompetitive. So I'm not going to buy at 130 and be able to sell at the same price with the person who bought at 110. But as government, we're not going to market because of profitability. In essence, we are looking to how do we empower our farmers? How do we ensure the person who's taken time to go to the farm gets a return on their investments? That's what we look at. So that's one. So we've gone big on buying rice from Ahero, and we did that project for 2 years, and it's still ongoing. I think as at last year, for us, the ideal situation is to spur the market for these customers. So when people get to know that, the more people are not desperate to sell to brokers, then they also come up there like, we'll buy your rice because the rice is good quality. We'll buy your rice at 130. So then I don't need no longer to go and buy the rice because I've created a market for them at a good rate. If then the abuse comes again, I step back in. So that's also my role. If I give you a very good example, like in the Nyanza area where we were buying rice, I mean, we created a market of them. I used to buy at 47 shillings per kilo paddy. Now they're getting 57 shillings in Uganda. I mean, if there's a market, they sell. That's what we want. We want the farmer to be able to get the best out of what we are doing. And I don't have to be there for a long time. And that's why when I see retailers panicking because KNTC is coming, we're only coming so that we can make sure people sense check. Please just do the right thing. Once we find out you're doing the right thing, we step out, we go to something else, because that's our role, to just make sure that people are doing the right thing, they're selling goods at the right price, that they're not marking it up too high, that they're affecting Kenyans. So in essence, that's what we're trying to do.
But then now you're then not allowing the free market to operate, because a free market would operate if the market is able to offtake the rice from this broker at a certain price. The broker will actually go and try and squeeze how much you can get from the farmer.
Yeah.
Now the farmer is having to sell this at a higher price because of the cost of production, which is something else that should be dealt with by somebody else. When you come in as KNTC and set the price for the farmer at 130, are you not affecting the price that I'm going to buy the rice at?
Well,
destabilizing the free market.
Well, the thing is, I think we have to look at different facets of who we need to take care of. What I'm trying to say is that there's the price of the commodity. I mean, I think we've been here, we've had the discussion again and again. It's the same media that propagated that, government are forcing farmers to buy maize at 5,000 shillings, whilst the market price, I don't know, it was 6,000, I can't remember what that number was. But, it's exactly, I mean, we have to choose. Who do we want to support? Do we want to support that poor woman who wakes up every day and toils to make sure that there is food for her children? And she has invested in inputs. There are inputs to farm.
Yep.
There's labor. Whether it is her own labor or she's hiring labor, I mean, there's labor cost. There's a cost to everything. Yeah. So when someone comes and says, because they have money, I can buy it at 110. I mean, you go and do whatever you want. I mean, this person is left saying, okay, fine, I spent 110. Let me just get my money back. Are we being fair? What is the role of government in all this? I mean, in all fairness. Are we looking at open market as a way of frustrating production, or are we looking, because the next time, you know what that lady will do?
She will not go back to farm.
She'll not go back and farm. And that's exactly what has happened in Kenya. People are not farming because they're not getting return on investment. And this has been destroyed because the people who are buying the commodities are pushing it for their own interests.
Sure.
So at some point, there has to be a balance. And that's what we are seeking. That as we tell people to go back and farm, we are taking care of now the fertilizer program. Yeah. My work is actually just to bring the fertilizer. Ministry of Agriculture is there to encourage the people to go back to our farms. You farm. And I know as government, we are doing a lot across the value chains to ensure that the farmer will no longer be taken advantage of.
My issue here, though, Pamela, is once you come in to buy at above what the market is ready to buy at, you're basically subsidizing the farmer at the point of purchase. Now, how much are you going to offload that to the market yourself? let's say you've bought the rice, the brokers are asking for 110, KNTC comes into the market and says, we'll take the rice from the farmers at 130. How much will I buy as a consumer?
So Latif, I want to ask you a simple question. Is it better for me to find a market for the value that I have bought, or to push the price down? I'll give you an example. We have avocados, yeah? There is what we take. I mean, even tea, grade 1 tea. You don't consume grade 1 tea, do you?
No, hardly.
It's exported.
Do we even know what grade 1 tea is?
Yes.
Consume
so that's what I'm trying to say. If we have good Bishori rice, and it's of high quality, who says we have to consume it here if the people cannot afford? We can leave it for those who can afford. We can say, for whatever, let's do this. The rest, let's export, and we're looking for things to go. I mean, we can export and bring the rice that we can afford and eat it here. But we cannot tell the farmer, now stop growing Bishori. Go and let's plant what we can afford. Let's all plant, let's be eating Sindano, because that's what we can afford. I mean, what are we saying about a country? If we can produce A-class rice that can be eaten in China, in Korea, in India for a top dollar price, let's export. And then let's consume what we can afford.
If the export market is available, and the export market can afford 130, then the export market would be at the farm gate, asking for 130. You're coming in to ask for 130 because the market is asking for 110, which is lower from what you...
Well,
my argument here is, are you not destabilizing the market? I'm not destabilizing. I'm saying the farmer should be paid for the effort and the sweat they make. And if the farmer deserves 130, I'll pay 130. If I have to sell it for 250 in another country, I'll go and seek that market. If that rice is in my store and I'm not able to sell it, then we can have the conversation. Pamela, you're not doing the right thing, because now you've bought the rice and it's stuck in my warehouse. But it's not stuck. I'm selling.
So am I hearing you say that then what we're doing here is essentially killing two birds with one stone? Because you're saying, okay, fine, the rice that the end user, the consumer, the person who is eating rice in their home, if they're able to buy this for a particular price, then let's go ahead and do that. But we are not going to do that at the risk of having this farmer earn less shilling than is their worth. If we have to take that rice that the farmer is farming essentially and sell it out of the country for them to be able to benefit, then we'll do that.
I think that's exactly what we're saying. And I can tell you, it's not only the rice farmer. There are so many farmers who are struggling in Kenya. We are not talking about sugar farmers. We are not talking of dengu farmers. I mean, beans. People have stopped. I mean, Kenyans, the food situation in Kenya is crazy. If you can actually just call a farmer here to sit and tell you their story, it's when you'll actually understand the role of government. In fact, you'll actually question where has KNTC been? What did they need to do? And we are now doing it. We are talking to different farmers. I just came from a meeting yesterday. Now we want to actually deal with Ndengu farmers. We finished with rice farmers. Now we want to deal with Ndengu and beans. What can we do to spur production? Because, I mean, there is opportunity for these farmers to make money. But if government leaves it open for only brokers to participate in that space, farmers will never thrive. And that's where I was born. I was educated with farm money. We used to farm in like a small whatever piece of land. But that is the whatever which we used to sell, and we used to make money. Coffee. Half of people have been educated by coffee and tea. We have to streamline those elements so that people can know they cannot take advantage. And if you do that, let me tell you, the problems you're seeing here now will end, because what will happen, everyone will go back to the farm. And most of the people, how many people live in the cities? You ask yourself. There are very few of us who are working. If you look at the data, the majority are the ones who are in the rural, and they're the ones who are supposed to be farming. But if we don't farm, that's when you have people seated on the shops outside the street, that you have youth now who have started taking, going into abusing drugs, because even if they go and farm, there's no money they're going to make from farming. We have to make farming an agri-business where people know, if I go to my farm, I'll be able to get money out of it. Even if I make 10 shillings a kilo of what I farm, that's okay. I mean, that is enough money. It will inspire me to say, I'll go back
I'll
again.
go back because I can make
it
some
will
more.
even inspire people to say, I can go and borrow money to buy inputs so that I can be able to, because I'll make money.
Okay, let's take a break. 27 minutes to 9. Pamela Mutua is the Managing Director of the Kenya National Trading Corporation. Established in 1965, given the role of, at that point of independence, spurring retail and wholesale business in the country, and then throughout the years, looking at how to step in and help in price stabilization for various commodities. And now that's what they've been doing. Importation of fertilizer, and now distributing that fertilizer. Well, the Ministry of Agriculture and counties distributing the fertilizer, off-taking produce from farmers, and also importing produce that comes into the country to stabilize the market. We want to understand a bit more. Time for us to take that break. We'll be back shortly.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Kenya National Trading Corporation Managing Director Pamela Mutua, who's here to tell us how KNTC impacts consumer commodity prices. She's explained to us what they do in terms of getting into the markets, in and out, noticing, observing what's happening, and then coming in to help stabilize the price, either at farm gate price or at retail price.
You know, we spent the previous hour discussing CASs, the cost there involved with the appointments and so forth. But when you talk about KNTC in this hour, this is something I've lauded this government for. Because KNTC had died. I mean, you knew it existed somewhere, but you didn't know in which closet it had been put into. But you see, KNTC didn't exist in isolation. Again, I have to go back down memory lane. See, around that same time that KNTC was being established, moving forward, we had ICDC, the Industrial, Commercial and Development Corporation. We had Kenya Industrial Estates. There was KNTC, yes, but we had Agricultural Finance Corporation. We had ADC. Now, what am I saying?
KFA.
Yes.
The cooperatives, KPCU,
You've understood exactly where I'm going with this clearly. We had a structure that was supposed to be what you call the back end of all the activities that would eventually end up at KNTC. Meaning, if you are an industrialist, you want to set up maybe a business, you want to set up a hotel, you wanted to do something, there was ICDC. You would go there.
Yeah.
This SME, small, light industry that we talk about, Kenya Industrial Estate was supposed to cover that. Okay? So that locally would grow that capacity to ensure that when matters get to KNTC is supposed to now function and ensure their commercial responsibility is carried out well. You're talking about agriculture. We had government farms, we had ADC, but we had Agricultural Finance Corporation that was supposed to ensure that the farmer is looked after. If you look at this discussion of edible oil and you go into our archives, in 1994, a task force, I'm calling it a task force, it wasn't that, it was a committee, was sent to India to study how it is India moved from a net importer of edible oils to a net exporter. And they did it in 3 years. Now, what they did was very simple. They looked at what you needed to plant to produce oils, whether it is soya beans, whether it is sunflower, whether it's groundnuts, whether it's cashew nuts, and they focused. But they took it a step further. Whatever was the residue from this, the cakes, they realized this was also cattle feed rather. So they did a 360, if not a 720 on this one. So nothing went to waste. Now, when you have everything that is being produced and left behind being utilized, you are then supporting a different industry. Now, that was now the dairy industry.
Yeah.
That was the chicken and egg industry. And it goes on and on and on. Now, that task force came back and we determined. Remember, there used to be stories of pyrethrum. Okay? There were stories of cashew nuts at the coast, palm oil at the coconuts, groundnuts. Somehow this story started, but it was never given the full impetus. We even had stories of sunflower. We pushed up to a point, and then somehow it was let to die. Now, if India could turn around their situation, we could have. But the support system that was embedded in these agencies that I'm speaking about, again, were not supported.
Yeah.
So we continued being a net importer, as opposed to having been what we could have been, given the structures that we started off with. So when you look at the role of KNTC now, what they're doing is trying to revive something that was set up a long time ago and to actually play their role. And their task is a difficult one. and will continue being difficult if the supporting agencies don't do.
If everything else is not aligned.
Yes, KNTC is going to have a very hard time.
Because the area of import, for example, Pamela, all those things that you've said, the reason why, and you've said it yourself, the reason why farmers are having this difficulty is because the cost of production is high, cost of inputs is high, fertilizer. Now we are subsidizing fertilizer, but then are we addressing everything else that makes the cost of production high, the cost of milk high, the cost of growing a grain of rice high, or maize high? All those things. We have acidic soils, we have high cost of fertilizer. Do we have fertilizer being produced locally? Are all those things being worked on so that you now focus on coming in and going out of the market to support the value chain?
Thanks for asking that. I think it would have been ideally a response that from a policy perspective that could have been answered. But one thing I can assure you, Latif, there's a lot going on. If you've had a discussion with my cabinet secretary, Mr. Moses Kuria, he will tell you about how we are working to spur manufacturing. We're not going to spur manufacturing, including of edible oil, if we do not have local production. So as we look at all these facets, all these things are going on. By the way, AFC, ADC, they're not dead. They're there. They exist. ICDC, I think with mergers, strengthened. Now it's Kenya Development Corporation. We have all these bodies. Maybe KIE, they need to do something there so that we can streamline the SMEs.
Yep.
But in essence, all these bodies exist. I liked how they called us moribund, and I was like, that's not a bad idea. There's not, if you've ever seen a life cycle of a product, I mean, it goes down and sometimes it could die. But if it doesn't die, it will be given, there's something that comes in. If you don't reinvent yourself, you can die. But we reinvented ourselves. We have shown that we are capable of actually doing something, and that has given the government the impetus to support us to be able to move to the next level. As you asked me at the beginning, am I going to be importing forever? I actually don't want to be importing. I actually want to be exporting. Exporting is a better business. I don't know whether you know that. Because when I export, I bring dollars to the country. So this importation, I'm actually hoping that it will be just a one-off. I want in the next 6 months to sit here with you and tell you now we are exporting.
And we're not talking about something that's highly mysterious, are we?
No.
Because here you are saying that, and I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I would hope that that's what you were saying, that if we're going to solve the problems of food in terms of supply in this country, as well as sort out the development issue, that Kenya must grow its own food.
It must.
Kenya must grow its own food, feed its populations, care for its farmers, and then start to send some of that surplus outside the country.
I have said exactly that. I mean, you ask yourself, why are we buying rice from India? Do you think the Indians don't eat rice? They do. But it means they have already
even more than
taken,
we do.
Yeah, even more than we do. But it means that they're, Pakistanis. It means they've already fed their population. Now they have grown so much that they have enough to feed us, to feed maybe Dubai, to feed other countries. I mean, that's a position ideally Kenya should be. So, that we have enough land, that if actually we can be able, that's why you're seeing plans around water. Because you're not going to farm if you have no water. That's why you're seeing plans around fertilizer. Why are we giving a certain type of fertilizer? It's not because we are constrained and we just want to give this type of fertilizer. There's thinking around it. He talked about acidic soils. If you have acidic soils, you don't produce as much. We have to do something and we have to stop sitting. I think in the near future, you'll actually start seeing. My dad was an agricultural extension officer, and I take pride of that because he used to go out. He would be in farmers' farms, teaching them what the correct way of farming, what to do to get the quality we need. We have bodies that if you want to export, you can actually visit as a farmer and tell them, I want to be exporting beans. For example, what type of beans are required in Europe? They give you
the know-how. I think you then preempt a question that I was going to ask in terms of folks that you're working with to be able to have these things done. Because we keep talking about the wealth of information, the wealth of knowledge that is right here in Kenya. And then now you look at KNTC and say, okay, if this is the goal that we are trying to achieve, there are bodies that have been set up. Calro, all these guys have this information, and from conversations that we've had, it's almost as though they're begging people to say, we have this, how can we share and how can we help? It seems to me that they would be fantastic partners to be able to see this come to life.
They're already our partners. Let me tell you, one of the things I like about what I'm doing now is that I don't have to struggle alone. I'll give you an example of what we did with fertilizer. We actually used the Ministry of Interior, the chiefs, assistant chiefs, to collect data on farmers. This data was structured, the paperwork was structured by Calro. This data, once it's received, it was given to Bureau of Statistics, Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. They put it in a format that can be now used. They transferred it to Calro. Now, Calro has a database of over 5 million farmers, and it's growing very fast because I think there was unbelievability. Kenyans were all those people who were suspicious. Why are these people collecting my data? Maybe let me not give my data. But now people have realized, hey, we are serious. We are actually using the data, because with that data, I can tell who is planting, who needs fertilizer, what type of fertilizer. We can plan ahead. And that's why we're talking about agricultural data, so that we can use data to plan. Now, even for my short-term rains, I've already started planning the data, using the data, how many farmers will be growing, because it's short rains, maybe it's the crops that, grow for a short period, could be beans, could be ndengu, those kind of things. You plan for them. Do they need fertilizer? Do they need how much? If it's maize, how much will be needed? So there's that plan which is there. Now you can see the stakeholder. The Calro then guys analyze the data and tell us, now these are the number of bags of fertilizer. These people, we send messages using Safaricom or other, if you're in Telcom or Airtel, you get a message saying that, fertilizer is ready. Please go to your nearest store. Go and collect fertilizer. Farmers are like, oh, you mean this was serious? So even if you're not planned to, you're not planned to go to the farm, you're like, okay, let me try. Maybe I'm entitled to have, number of acres. We've multiplied by the number of bags. So, you're like, maybe I'll plant half. These people might not be serious. But I can tell you, in 2 years, they'll be like, these people are serious. I am going to my farm, because they'll see. We were serious about providing the inputs. We want to provide seeds maybe in the next round. We want to provide input so that the farmer can say, now let me go and farm. My work is to farm. When I produce now, the government is ready to take. We're also preparing ourselves now as KNTC. If there's a bumper harvest of maize, NCPB perhaps will be the one who will handle the maize. They have silos to dry. They can store the grains. And then now our work is to find the market. Where are we going to sell the maize? Is it to the millers? Is it outside the country? Or do we even create strategic reserves that can be able to store grains even for a longer period of time? Because maize is a commodity that can become very scarce, very fast. So how do we dry the maize so that it can be stored for a longer period of time? So those are the discussions that are happening. And I can tell you, if you're patient enough, you'll start seeing the result. You'll see the results. It's a whole, all these players are in this thing. We are not doing this alone. So
right now, the farmers are accessing the fertilizer and they're paying, 3,500?
Yes.
How much did you buy the fertilizer for?
We're buying the fertilizer at 4,500, so the government is subsidizing at 1,000 shillings.
Is that the most competitive price? How do we know that 4,500 was the best that came?
Actually, from last year, November, we even had meetings with the Fertilizer Association of Kenya locally, and we asked them to give us the costs of fertilizer, what they would want to sell to us. And I can tell you, the fertilizer we selected was what we could be able to give to the farmer at the affordable price. We had fertilizer ranging to 6,000, 5,800. And the question we asked is, do we want to buy expensive fertilizer and then subsidize for less people, or would we rather go cheaper and subsidize to more farmers? And that's why you can see now, previous subsidies, people have, farmers have been getting, I think, up to 10, 20 bags maximum. Now we have farmers buying 1,000 bags.
Can I ask the question, Pamela?
Yeah, sure.
When you talk about finding something that is cost effective, what are you looking for? Are you looking for efficacy? Are you looking for something that will actually produce the yield that is desired, or is the focus on the actual cost? Because it could cost less, but you may need to use a lot more for you to have the results that the one which is considered expensive would.
Okay, so first we were looking at efficacy, and then secondly we were also looking at soil acidity, our soils. So we were asking ourselves, what is the best fertilizer to use for the type of soils we have? And so based on that range, we were coming up and saying, first let's eliminate what is not, what we don't want to use that can cause soil acidity. So you remove that, then we are left with what can now be used and who is giving us the best price. I mean, the types of fertilizers are not many. We have DAP, we have NPKs, and then we have blends of NPKs.
Yeah.
So in essence, those are the fertilizers we use for planting. So we just went with NPKs and the blends of NPK, and we asked ourselves, what is the price range based on what was available, and we selected what was fair.
What sort of period of time do we need to wait before we actually understand the effectiveness of this fertilizer?
When the season ends, I think we should be harvesting. When does that harvest happen? Maybe May, June? I don't know. That's when we'll be able to say.
That's when we'll be able to tell whether this fertilizer actually did the thing that it was supposed to do or not.
Yes.
There's this never-ending discussion that we have talked about in this studio. I'm referring to edible oils and the manufacturing of it, and the capacity that the industries that deal with edible oils have. Now, if I leave the issue of the dollar aside and the ability to import whatever materials one needs aside, okay? If you then support what you call the stabilization of the cost of living, how does that impact the industries, the people who are the second tier of value addition?
Okay, first, as government, we support value addition, and I do not want this to be constrained. The fact that we're importing a portion of edible oils, to think that government does not support manufacturing. I mean, that is exactly where, jobs will come from, and not only jobs, where, people who grow the inputs, if we can be able to encourage people to grow more and more inputs, that's where we are headed to. So why are we here? The history of edible oils is very interesting. Before 2018, it was an open market. People could import edible oil. I mean, any trader could import edible oil to compete locally. And I think one of the things we realize is that the cost of edible oil is very high. And it is almost out of reach for many Kenyans. And we have looked at what are the costs of inputs and how much would it be ideally. Because even if I was to import edible oil finished and even pay the taxes, which are there in place, of course, to cushion the edible oil manufacturers, you still end up, the product is cheaper in the market. And the question I ask myself is, why then are they not able to come down, their price down? I'll give you an example. When they got wind that government is going to import cooking oil, at some point in December, January, cooking oil actually price came down. So I ask myself, nothing changed other than just, information that government is going to import. So for me, it goes back to what I was talking about. As traders, as manufacturers, we have to take care of the consumer. We have to stop looking at self-interests and ask ourselves, it's not always about money. I know it's about money, but it can't always be about money.
Pamela, do I hear you to be saying that the edible oil manufacturers are a cartel?
Am I allowed to say that?
And I'm using the word cartel in the worst possible sense. Yes, because
that they cannot justify the price at which they've been selling.
Yes, because if they could reduce it because of an imminent threat, then it means they could have sold it at that price previously. So the question is then asked, then why were they not selling it? But then the question I would ask, is that the whole story?
I would want them to come here and tell us the whole story. But for me, from where I sit, I actually saw that, they're playing with our minds. I do not want to be judgmental because I'm not here to judge them. Everyone is entitled to their business. For me, I can only talk about what I want to do. I want to make sure that if they are not doing the right thing, then I can step in and bring cheaper cooking oil for people to buy. And especially the people who cannot afford. Maybe you and me can afford to buy from the supermarket shelves at the price that it's going for. I don't know. But there are people who actually are struggling. And I don't know whether you've ever gone to a kiosk and you find someone trying with this bottle of whatever, asking to be given, just a little oil
of it,
to cook for that day. That is the person I'm talking about. So when you go and you tell them they have to buy it at 300 or 500 shillings, they're not going to cook that day. They'll just boil with water and they move on.
Perhaps a conversation should be had with them to understand why they're costing it or they're pricing the way they price it at. Is it because of the cost of doing business, just like you said about farmers? Is it because of the taxation and the levies that they have to undergo?
The cost of production.
The cost of production. What is it?
And I believe that discussion is ongoing, at a policy level. For me, I just strongly believe they need to engage, and they need to remain open to this kind of mitigations, especially if they don't step up to the table and engage with government on the same.
We've come to the end of the hour. It's a short one, and you need to come back and tell us. There's a lot more, especially when the all the imported grain arrives and to start rolling it out to the shops. We need to understand how the mechanics of that will work. But thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Eric. I think that's the only name I got.
CT and
CT and
Ndu.
Oh, CT and Ndu.
You can call me Pamela.
Okay. Ndu.
No.
Not at all. Thank you for having me, and I can't wait to come back. It was a nice, interesting discussion. I really love to come back.
Asante, come back soon. Pamela Mutua is the Managing Director of the Kenya National Trading Corporation, telling us about how KNTC is impacting commodity prices.